Hello and welcome to another video of the Alalibo Academy. We are glad you're here, and today we are discussing a very important topic, trying to understand the differences between two major systems of government, the presidential system of government and the parliamentary system of government. All right, so let's take a closer look at these differences. Now, the first one here, the presidential system of government, the president is not a member of the legislative body. Now, this is a very critical point to make. The president is not a member of the legislative body. On the other hand, the prime minister is a member of the legislative body. In the parliamentary system of government, the prime minister is part of the legislative body. The prime minister is elected into the legislative body and is part of the legislative body. Very critical difference between the two systems of government. Now, these systems of government have been in place for decades and centuries and practiced around the world. In the presidential system of government, the United States presents a great example, one of the biggest and strongest systems of the presidential system of government. Today we have countries around the world. In Africa, Nigeria practices the presidential system of government. South Africa practicing the presidential system of government as well. On the other hand, we have also big countries practicing the parliamentary system of government. UK, for example, Canada, for example, Australia, New Zealand, all of them have the parliamentary system of government in place. All right, so the first difference then, please, let's take note of this difference, is that the president under the presidential system of government is not part of the legislative body. On the other hand, in the parliamentary system of government, the prime minister, and that's usually the title, the prime minister is part of the legislative body. Now, the second difference is the separation of functions, and this is very, very critical in terms of structure. So the separation of functions of the legislative body and the executive arm under the presidential system of government, and this enables checks and balances that are so critical in transparency and holding the different arms of government accountable. Right, so under the presidential system of government, there are three arms of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Now, the executive and the legislative are elected separately. All right, so they are not elected with the legislative body. They're elected separately. On the other hand, no separation here of the legislative body and executive arm. As a matter of fact, legislature holds the power. The power lies in the legislature. The leader of the country, usually the prime minister, answers to the legislative body, and that's why we often see question and answer sessions in Parliament, in the Canadian Parliament, in the UK Parliament, in Australia, New Zealand, and around the world that practice countries that practice the parliamentary system of government. All right. The next difference is that the executive under the presidential system of government is elected separately from members of the legislature. Elected separately, very key difference, right? In the United States, for example, you have presidential elections every 4 years, but you actually have elections every 2 years. Members of the House are elected, House of Representatives in the United States, for example, are elected every 2 years. Right, so that means there are elections that don't involve the presidency, right? It's called the midterm elections that don't involve the presidency in the United States. So the president is elected separately from the members of the legislature, and that goes along with the first difference, which is the president is not a member of the legislative body. The leader is elected and does not need parliamentary majority to form the government. It's not necessary because the president is not elected as part of the parliamentary body or the legislative body. It's elected separately. So a parliamentary majority is not needed. In the United States, for example, sometimes the Democrats have the White House, but they don't have the Congress. They don't have the Senate. They don't have the House of Representatives, but they have the White House. Sometimes the other way around. They have the Republicans don't have the White House. They don't have the Senate, and they don't have the House of Representatives. Or sometimes they have the Senate and not the House of Representatives, and so forth. Again, suggesting that you don't need parliamentary majority in the United States under the presidential system of government to lead, because the president is elected separately. Then, on the other hand, the parliamentary system of government, the executive comes from the members or election of the members of the legislature. And this is a critical difference as well. So the legislature then produces the executive. The legislature is elected, and within the ruling party, the party that has the majority, they appoint ministers, they appoint the prime minister, who is usually the head of the party, and that means they are responsible and accountable to the legislature. And the power lies in the legislature. The power lies in the legislature, right? So this is a very important difference between the two systems. The executive emerges from the election of members of the legislature and leads as a result of parliamentary majority. Now, sometimes there's no majority, there's coalition, a government, where the party with the most seats in parliament, it may not be a majority. For example, if you need 120 seats to be a majority and you have 110 seats, you're not a majority at a point, but you have the most seats. You go into a coalition with another party. That way you have some kind of majority votes on important resolutions and so forth. All right, so the final point here is the president is the head of state. In the presidential system of government, the president is the head of state. And the presidential system of government is usually a republic. It's a republic. The president is the head of state. There is no figurehead anywhere. The president is the head of state. The United States is a great example. Again, countries around the world, France, for example, the president of France is the head of state. If you go to big countries like Brazil, the president is the head of state. Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, those countries around the world. These are republics, right? Usually the countries that run the presidential system of government are considered as republics. On the other hand, the prime minister is not the head of state. Under the parliamentary system of government, the prime minister is not the head of state. Usually a monarch or a figurehead is the head of state, and they are not republics. These countries are not republics because the head of government is not the head of state. So, for example, in Canada, the head of state is the Queen, is the monarch in England, and she has representatives in Ottawa holding the title of Governor General at the federal level. At the provincial level, is called the Lieutenant Governor. These are representatives of the Queen. Australia and New Zealand also have the monarch as the head of state, the British monarch as the head of state. The prime ministers are the head of government. They lead the government, the ministries are accountable to them, and the different agencies and so forth, but they are not the head of state. So these are critical differences between these very major and important systems of government we have today. The president is the head of state under this category. The prime minister is not. The executive is elected separately from the members of the legislature. The executive on this side emerges from the election of the members of the legislature. There's separation of the functions of the legislative body and between the checks and balances become very critical and part of the structure of this type of governance. And there's no separation of the legislative body and the executive arm. The legislature holds the power. The leader usually is the prime minister, answers to the legislative body. And finally, and most importantly, I should say, the president is not a member of the legislative body. The prime minister is a member of the legislative body. So here we are, the differences between the two critical systems of governance that we have today.